Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a bit different, and honestly, it's incredibly fascinating. I want you to imagine you're a linguistic detective, or maybe a doctor reading a diagnostic report. We hear so much about reaching fluency in a new language. But what does that plateau right before fluency actually look like? Well, today, we're looking at a real-world case study of an intermediate English learner named Andre. We're going to analyze his exact errors, uncover the hidden psychological reasons he makes them, and reveal the brilliant teaching strategies used to finally push him over that fluency plateau. Okay, let's take a quick look at our agenda. Think of this as our step-by-step performance dossier for Andre. First, diagnosing a student's mistakes. Second, the past simple workhorse. Third, native habits and collocations. Fourth, prepositions, articles, and particles. Fifth, the L1 interference effect. And finally, number 6, the teacher's hidden strategy. Let's jump right into section 1, diagnosing a student's mistakes. We're kicking off our investigation by looking at the initial symptoms, which were captured during a 33-minute free conversation assessment with Andre. No textbooks, no multiple choice tests, just natural, spontaneous speech. When we look at Andre's profile, a very clear theme emerges, and it's something every language learner really needs to hear. True fluency isn't about memorizing massive, advanced vocabulary words. The things keeping Andre stuck aren't highly complex academic concepts. Rather, it's about mastering the mundane connective tissue of the language. Overcoming these intermediate hurdles requires perfecting the absolute basics. And the data absolutely nails it, illustrating the real bottlenecks in Andre's conversational flow. In just 33 minutes, he made 22 distinct errors with the past simple tense. He had 9 errors with collocations, which are basically word pairings, and 8 with prepositions. This tells us exactly where to focus our treatment. It's not scattered everywhere, it's highly concentrated in a few foundational areas. Moving to section 2. The past simple workhorse. Let's examine our highest frequency symptom, the absolute workhorse of storytelling, the past simple tense. You need this tense anytime you describe an action that started and finished in the past. Forming the past simple seems pretty easy, right? You just add ed to the end of a word. Played, watched. But here is the massive roadblock for learners. 200. There are roughly 200 common irregular verbs in English, and there is absolutely no spelling rule to save you here. You just can't guess them. Many of these are verbs used every single day, and they simply must be memorized through repetition in real contexts. If we look at the specific notes from his teacher, we can detail exactly how Andre's tense formation breaks down in real time. First, he has base form confusion. He says, "we don't sleep today," when he actually means "we didn't sleep." Then there's irregular isolation. He knows the words drink, drank, and drunk exist, but mid-sentence, he struggles to isolate the correct past simple form. And finally, direct calques, which are literal word-for-word translations. He says, "I gift a gift," because the verb gift exists, but native speakers would almost always say, "gave a present." Which brings us to section 3, native habits and collocations. Moving to the second major issue on our diagnostic chart, we encounter the highly illogical world of native speaker habits. This is where language gets wonderfully weird. We're talking about collocations. In English, we use light verbs like have, make, do, and take, and we strictly pair them with certain nouns. For instance, you make a mistake. You don't do a mistake. You throw a party. You don't do a party. There's literally no grammar rule explaining why. The brilliant analogy provided in the teacher's guide is that you should treat these word pairings just like phone numbers. You don't try to find logic in a phone number, right? You just memorize it as a single, useful chunk. We see this exact same type of confusion with reporting verbs. Andre struggles immensely with verbs like say, tell, speak, and talk. The crucial point here is understanding the strict, distinct patterns behind these communication verbs. Tell is almost always followed by a person, like she told us a story. But say is followed by the thing said, not the person. He said hello. You never say he said me hello. Mastering this small, specific pattern is exactly what stops you from mixing them up mid-sentence. All right, section 4, prepositions, articles, and particles. Next up, we need to address the tiny words that cause massive structural headaches for intermediate learners like Andre. Think of these as the little gears in the machine. Let's look at prepositions, in, on, and at. The major trap here is that direct translation usually fails. You actually have to learn the strict English system. For time, in is for longer periods like months or years. On is for specific days like on Monday. At is for exact times, like at 9 a.m. And the logic maps perfectly to physical places too. In is for enclosed spaces, on is for surfaces, and at is for specific points like at the bus stop. When Andre says he was in concert, he's missing this spatial logic. It should be at a concert. And then there are articles, a, an, and v. This is another area where Andre kind of drops the ball entirely, just omitting them where they're required. But the teacher's guide provides the ultimate cheat code for choosing articles, boiling all that complex grammar down to one simple question you gotta ask yourself. Is this specific or general? If it's general, you often don't need an article at all. If it's specific and the person you're talking to knows exactly which item you mean, you use the. Simple as that. We've reached section 5, the L1 interference effect. All right, this is the climax of our case study. We know what Andre's mistakes are, but now we're uncovering the actual diagnosis behind why he's making these specific mistakes in the first place. The diagnosis is a phenomenon called L1 interference. L1 stands for Language 1, your native mother tongue. This is what happens when the deeply ingrained rules, vocabulary, or phonetic patterns of your native language incorrectly transfer over to the new language you're trying to learn. This proves that Andre's errors aren't random at all, they're actually highly systematic misapplications of his native language onto English. In Andre's case, his L1 is Russian. During his assessment, he said things like, "we get celebration," and "I speak about." If we contrast this with English, we see the disconnect right away. In Russian, verbs are sometimes collapsed. Russian uses a single verb, where English distinguishes between having a party, throwing a party, or giving a present. Similarly, the Russian word for speak also covers talk and say as a default. Because of this L1 interference, Andre leans on get and speak as universal crutches in English, which makes his speech sound, well, unnatural. This interference completely explains his preposition errors too. There's a fantastic insight from the teacher's appendix. Andre kept saying things like, "on this weekend." Why? Because Russian requires a preposition there. But in English, when we use proximal time markers like this, next, or last, we literally use zero preposition. You don't say in next month, you just say next month. Recognizing this exact point of friction is how you actually cure the error. And remember his struggle with articles? The diagnosis is incredibly straightforward. Russian simply has no articles. They literally don't exist in his native tongue. Because of this, the teacher notes that the pedagogical fix isn't to give him dense grammar lectures with dozens of article-by-article rules. That's just going to overwhelm him. Instead, the treatment requires generic, repetitive noun phrase drills so he can start to instinctively feel the rhythm of when a and the are actually required. Finally, Section 6, the teacher's hidden strategy. Knowing all of this data, let's unveil the treatment plan and see how the teacher strategically orchestrates the path to fluency for Andreas. This might be the most counterintuitive part of the whole dossier. The teacher actually has a list of deliberate omissions. You see, a master teacher's secret weapon is often what they deliberately choose to ignore. Andrea clearly has trouble with the present perfect tense, but the teacher explicitly avoids teaching it right now, so it doesn't dilute his focus on fixing the past simple first. The principle is clear. Stabilize the core form before contrasting it with a brand new one. This builds the perfect lesson architecture. The step-by-step plan takes the student from a gentle 5-minute warm-up using reciprocal pronouns through a metacognitive review where Andre actually has to explain why an answer is correct, into a highly demanding 30-minute narrative task, focusing heavily on the past simple. And finally, it all wraps up with a cool-down of free conversation to maintain his confidence. But the real magic is in the main activity. The teacher doesn't use boring, generic textbook prompts. They disguise the heavy grammar repetition completely inside the student's personal hobbies. Andre is asked to retell the plot of his favorite anime, Chainsaw Man. He talks about his recent video game sessions and his trip to Armenia. The teacher forces him to use the past simple tense for all of this, creating organic, highly engaging, and memorable practice. Which brings us to the end of our diagnostic report. Looking at Andre's journey, we're left with this question to ponder. Is fluency truly a set of rigid rules to be memorized, or is it actually a series of contextual habits waiting to be built? The data absolutely suggests it's the latter. By focusing on the connective tissue, understanding native language interference, and using targeted, personalized repetition, that plateau can absolutely be broken. Think about how this applies to your own learning journey, no matter the subject. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep building those habits.